very much in the news and on our minds, a subject that you are really uniquely qualified to talk about, and that's North Korea. The audience will remember that Secretary Albright went to Pyongyang in October 2000 and met there with the then leader of North Korea, Kim Jong Il, the father of Kim Jong Un, and had a round of discussions with him about a deal that's very much like the kind of deal that's being discussed as President Trump prepares to go to his summit meeting on June 12th. So I want to ask Secretary Albright to begin by talking about that trip and talking about the nature of negotiating with this regime then and now.
Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be here and with you, David, because I love reading your columns and your books and being friends. And so thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. I do think that it is a very difficult and peculiar regime to deal with. And in the case of what happened during the Clinton administration, we had in fact been dealing with North Korea from the beginning of the administration, because they had threatened to pull out of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and there were a number of aspects that we were trying to deal with. I won't go through the story, but we were very involved in trying to figure out how to deal with North Korea. And quite similarly to what is happening now, Kim Dae-jung, the president of South Korea, was somebody who wanted to have a relationship with North Korea. He developed something called the Sunshine Policy. So when I watch the kind of things that President Moon of South Korea is doing now, while not totally the same, it's that same approach of we are one people, why can we not in some way work together? What had happened, and I think the thing that is essential to mention, is how much preparation and how much time the Clinton administration had spent in trying to learn more about North Korea and meeting with them in a number of times at the United Nations in different ways. And yet, still, even then, it was very hard to figure out who they were and how to deal with them. And what makes it interesting in terms of parallels at the moment, this all began, my visit to North Korea, with the number 2 guy, Vice Marshal Cho, coming to the United States in order to invite President Clinton. So the number 2 guy is here now talking to Secretary Pompeo, trying to get ready for this summit. So what happened was that I first met him in the State Department, he looked very diplomatic, and then we went over the next day to the White House, and he was in full uniform, and he gave President Clinton a folder in which there was an invitation for President Clinton to go. And he said, well, maybe at some point I will go, but this has to be prepared, so I'm sending the secretary. They weren't real thrilled about that, but I obviously went. I think the part, though, that needs to be stated very clearly, a year before that, or 18 months before that, President Clinton had asked former Secretary of Defense Bill Perry to do a complete review of our North Korea policy. And it deserved that because there was so much that had happened. And what happened was Bill Perry went ahead of me several months and said to them, this is fork in the road time. We will use force, or you can negotiate. And they said, we want to negotiate. So there had been all that preparation. So I go. We had no embassy there, so it was really hard to figure out how everything was going to work. We knew very little about Kim Jong Il. There was one thing we did know, so Dennis Rodman is all my fault, because we did know that they liked basketball and that Kim Jong-il liked Michael Jordan. So I took over a basketball autographed by Michael Jordan, which was in their Holy of Holies. So when you think about it.
The idea of Madam Secretary carrying in her diplomatic pouch this signed basketball, it's a great image.
So but I think the thing that's
Did you brief Dennis Rodman before?
No, he would. Nobody's interested except you hearing about what I'd done. But I do think that what is interesting is how smart and informed Kim Jong Il was. We had a lot of kind of back and forth about basketball, but then basically he was he technically knew an awful lot of things. We were actually talking about missile limits at the time. He did not consult his experts. He really was able to talk about various aspects of the programs, and he spent a lot of time on it. It was very interesting. He also could be very gracious. I mean, it was all kinds of dinners and all kinds of things. But I think that he was determined to make some progress. The problem was that we ran out of time. We were in the middle of, we had begun negotiations on the missile limits. They were held in Kuala Lumpur, and the election of 2000 happened.